Welcome back to another segment of Tabletop Chat. Now, I know I don't usually do reviews on codexes, but I felt obligated to do one on this particular codex. If you're a regular viewer, you know that in the past I've mentioned that I would like Game Workshops to do a Sisters of Battle Codex and start up new models and starter sets. Well, a few weeks ago, Game Workshops did come up with a sorta new codex for the Sisters of Battle. It's a digital codex, but to be honest, it's probably the most we're going to get. So I actually bought a Kindle so I could get the ebook version. There is another version for the iPad, or anything with an iOS system, but it's a little bit more expensive. And unfortunately, these are the only legal ways to get this codex. So before you rush out to buy a new device to get this, I'm going to try to go over this codex very quickly, mainly because I don't like editing long videos, to see if this is the right codex for you. Now, for starters, the codex does go into the history and fluff of the Sisters of Battle, who are now called Adepta Sororitas, which I guess they were always called that, but they weren't officially called that in the codex, but whatever. It's good information, and if you're a fluff addict like I am, it's pretty good. It's nothing that you won't find on a wiki, but it's a lot easier carrying this around on the bus instead of your computer. The codex also goes into the different kind of orders for the Sisters of Battle. This is kind of the equivalent to the different types of Space Marine chapters. So what does that mean for you? Pretty much different kind of color schemes you want for your sisters, if you want to make a fluff type army. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter what you paint them. Now, moving on from there, we get some new warlord traits. And like most warlord traits, some are good, some not so much. Once you get Tau, then it's all good. Okay, and now, before I go into the units, I'd like to talk about what makes the Sisters of Battle a little bit special that separate them from other armies, and that is their Acts of Faith. Now, what is an Act of Faith? An Act of Faith is a special ability that each unit in the Sisters of Battle army could use. In previous editions, it was a list that any unit could use. In this edition, each unit has their own specific ability. Some are good, some are bad. But the biggest change to the Acts of Faith from the previous editions is that in this version, each unit can only use it once, unless you get an upgrade that you can use it twice. In previous editions, the army had what was called Faith Points, which was a pool that all units could pull from, and you could use your Act of Faith multiple times. Now, it probably sounds like that they completely ruined Acts of Faith by making you use it only once. Maybe. It depends on how you look at it. You see, when you want to use Act of Faith, you gotta roll the dice, get a certain number, and then maybe you could use it, so it wasn't guaranteed. In previous editions, it was a fairly low percentile chance to get that to happen. And it's much easier to do it now. As an example, the worst chance you could get in previous editions was about a 33% chance you will successfully pull it off. If you bought certain upgrades, get special characters, join units, you could increase that to approximately 66%. And that's the best chance you could get in previous editions. In this version, it's done a little bit differently, and you use your leadership. And the lowest leadership would give you approximately a 63 to 66% chance. So the worst chance you could get to pull it off in this edition is very close to the best chance you could get in the previous editions. And then of course, if you upgrade units and get special characters, you can increase that to like in the mid 80s, close to 90%. So although you can only use it once, you have a much better chance in pulling it off. So is that an equal trade-off? I'm not sure. I guess it depends on what units you're using it on. If some units do have better Acts of Faith that you want to use multiple times, others, not so much. I haven't playtested this army in the new rules yet, so I can't really say. So now that I explained the Act of Faith, let's move on to the units. Let's start with the HQ units, which this book has 3, which is pathetically low. And 2 of these characters are special characters. In fact, these are the only special characters you're going to get in the Codex, which is very lazy for any Codex. But these 2 special characters are extremely good characters, and you'll probably want to take both of them in any army set you got. First off, Saint Celestine. She did increase a little bit in points, but she is still relatively cheap for what she does. She still has really good stats for the most part, and she is a killing machine against infantry. And she does have a pretty good support ability that buffs up units all around her. The only real complaint I have is her Act of Faith. In previous versions, when she died, she could just come back the next turn, and she could keep doing that over and over and over again. But since Act of Faith can only be used once in this version, she can only come back once. Albeit at a much better chance. This does kind of hurt her, but she's still the kind of unit that you still want to take in the army. Moving on next in the HQ units, we get Uriah Jacobus. He's a priest character, Lower points from St. Celestine, not as effective in melee combat, but he has some really great support abilities that'll buff up the army. Even if you take Celestine, you're probably going to want to take this guy as well because he is a really good support character. Next up, we get Canonist. And now in this new version, she is what I would say adequate. She comes at a relatively low point cost. She has some really good options from the armory and some good upgrades. And she's now a usable character, not an overpowered character, not a great character, just adequate. But if you're going to start stacking on a lot of equipment on her, and just start jacking up that point cost, you're probably going to want to take either Celestine or Uriah. The only real downside to her is her Act of Faith, which is a bonus towards melee combat, and Sisters of Battle aren't really that great in melee combat to begin with, but still an adequate unit nonetheless. Next up, we have the Ministeron Priest. Now I know I said there's only 3 HQ units. The Priests don't really take up an HQ slot. They're bonus HQ units, and these guys are really good. You could take up to 5 of them. They are much cheaper than they were in the last version, and you can stick them to any units in your army, and they're pretty good support units. They're only 25 points each. They'll make any squad fearless. They will add hatred, which if you are trying to force a unit to be a melee unit, will help out. And they get a special ability called War Hymns, which further increases melee ability. But I would stick them to other units just for the fearless, because that's pretty awesome. Moving on. Okay, I'm sorry, this is another HQ, but it's not technically an HQ unit, it's more of a HQ squad. The Ecclesiarchy Battle Conclave. And you could take 1 squad of this for each priest. And this is another melee squad. They haven't changed much since the last version. The only real downside is that they're focused mainly for melee. And the final HQ, non-HQ squad you're going to get is the Command Squad, which can only be taken if you have a Canonist. Now they do have some good upgrades. They're very similar to the Space Marine Command Squad. You could upgrade one of them to be the Pseudo Apothecary, so everybody gets feel no pain. And the other one could be upgraded to have a Loud Hailer, something like that, which gives all Sisters of Battle units within 12 inches around them to regrow failed Acts of Faith, which is really good. So this is another unit that could be a pretty good support unit. Their Act of Faith is another melee focused Act of Faith. So again, if you're trying to force that, they will be a little bit more effective than other squads. Now, moving away from the fake HQs, we'll get into the troops, which in this codex only has 1. Just 1. Even the orcs have 2, but no, Sisters of Battle only have 1. And they're called the Battle Sister Squad. And as far as troops go, this is a pretty good squad. They're a shooting squad, the Act of Faith improves their shooting ability. You can take anywhere from 5 to 20 of them. You get pretty decent weapon upgrades for at least 2 of them. They're fairly versatile, and chances are you're going to want to take a lot of them in the army. Next, we got the dedicated transports, which is pretty much a Rhino, which is almost exactly the same as a Space Marine Rhino, except this one costs 5 points more, but it comes with a 6-up in vulnerability save, which isn't great, but it's still pretty nice. And after the Rhino is an emulator, which is equivalent to a Razorback from the Space Marines. Lower transport capacity, much better weapon upgrades. The Twin-Link Multi-Melter rocks. And again, a 6-up invuln save. The only problem with these dedicated transports is that they have low armor, and if you're playing a kill point game, it's going to be free kill point to your opponent. Next up, we got elites. Starting with the Celestine Squad, which is another melee focused squad. And if you're going to get this squad, you're going to want to make it a melee focused squad. And because if you wanted to take this unit to be a shooting squad, you're better off taking the Battle Sisters. Their Act of Faith is melee focused, and they don't get any more upgrades that you couldn't get from Battle Sister squad, but their stats do push them to be more for melee focused. Next up, we get the Repentia Squad, which is another melee focused squad. This is a squad that could have been incredibly powerful. They have very powerful weapons that can tear anything apart, especially vehicles. And they're probably one of the most scariest melee unit you can find. Their main problem? They have no armor and they have no shooting ability, and they're not a very fast moving unit. Even if you put them in a transport, there's still going to be that one turn when they get out, stand there and get mowed down because they have no armor. If you can find a way to get to your opponent without having them all slaughtered in the shooting phase, they can get some damage done. Now moving on to the elites, we get fast attack. Starting with the Seraphim Squad. Here's the jump pack unit, and these girls can lay down some heavy up-close shooting firepower. They could completely tear apart light infantry. The Act of Faith helps them tear apart light infantry with their guns, and their jump packs make them very mobile. The only downside is they're not Dominions, which we're going to talk about now. The other fast attack is the Dominion Squad. These are your scout units, and this is a squad that can carry 4 special weapons, which means you have 4 multi-meltas. And their Act of Faith lets you ignore cover saves. So 4 multi-meltas ignoring cover saves will destroy almost anything. And giving them the scout ability so they can move up for early on is pretty sweet. Now, moving out of fast attack, we get the heavy support. Starting with one of my favorite vehicles, the Exorcist, which is a fairly strong tank with a 13 armor up front, and it has a very potentially powerful weapon, which could fire off from 1 to 6 very powerful missiles that could tear down most vehicles and take out most monstrous creatures in one salvo, if you get 6 attacks. And it has a pretty good range of 48 inches. And of course, like all the vehicles in this army, gets a 6-up invuln save. It is very effective. And next up, we get the Penitent Engine, which is the walker for the Sisters of Battle. And I really wanted to like this unit. But fact is, it has 11-11-10 armor, is open topped, no long range weapons, it has 2 heavy flamers. And they took away the ability that will let it do massive amounts of wounds in a melee attack. But it does have a 6-up invuln save, so you know that still doesn't make up for it. You could take 3 in a squad, which would give you a slightly better chance that one of them will be able to make it to enemy lines and do some damage. But the main problem is, since they're open topped and they only have 11-11-10 armor, they're going to get mowed down. Now finally, the last unit in this heavy support, the Retributor Squad, which is like the Devastator Squad for the Sisters of Battle. This squad could carry 4 heavy weapons, which could be anywhere from heavy bolters, multi-meltas, or heavy flamers. And there's only 2 real downsides of the squad. The first is their Act of Faith, which is a very good Act of Faith. It gives them Remnant on their attacks, but if compared to the last version, they could potentially do Remnant attacks on every turn. Now they can only do it once, which just further shines down on their second downside, which is they're not an Exorcist. Unless you want to make a fluff army and have a lot of Retributors, they're still usable, they're just not the most effective. And that's just for the troops. It's a lot lighter than other codexes, which is sad, but I think that's just kind of par for the course for the Sisters of Battle. Now, what do I think of the codex? To be honest, I am a little bit disappointed. Not just with the codex, but what Game Workshop has done with this release altogether. There are no new models for the Sisters of Battle. They're still trying to sell those metal pieces. There is no starter set for the Sisters of Battle because they haven't made those new models. Now, why is this a big deal? Well, those metal pieces are a lot more expensive than the plastic pieces, and you can't customize them, at least not easily. If you go on their website, you'll see that a 10-unit squad of Battle Sisters cost twice as much as a 10-unit squad of Space Marines, and you could customize the Space Marines, and you would have bits left over, so you could customize other units in your army. You can't do that with the Sisters of Battle. And honestly, they did dumb down a lot of the stuff for the Sisters of Battle in this codex, like the Act of Faith, only being able to use it once, albeit at a much better success rate. Aside from that one use Act of Faith, the Sisters of Battle have become pretty bland. They really do feel like a much weaker version of the Space Marines. And it used to be the Act of Faith that separated them from other power armor armies. So I thought maybe they did this to try to get new gamers in, because this does make it easier for new gamers to buy the Sisters of Battle army and feel more comfortable playing this army because there's not that much complicated stuff going on. That is, of course, unless you go to the pricing and you pretty much have to take out a mortgage to buy your army. If Game Workshops wanted to get new people into the game by having them start with Sisters of Battle, they didn't do it right. They could have done a much better job by having them much more affordable pieces. I know why they didn't make new models. Sisters of Battle army is not the most popular of armies. They make models for the most popular armies. I get that. But there's no way you're going to make this a popular army if you're going to demand players to pay so much more money for so much less. So with that being said, is this a bad codex? No, I wouldn't say it's a bad codex. It's an adequate codex. It's not going to be top tier like the Eldor or Tau, but it's not useless either. But if you're really hungry to get a new Sisters of Battle Codex, like I was, it's not going to break the bank too bad to get the Codex. I mean, I could say it's overpriced, but that's pretty much par of the course as far as Game Workshop goes. I mean, the only real sort of price tag they have is what they did to the models. But if you can find other female models that aren't half naked and completely sexualized, you could probably make your own unique army. Kind of like what I did. So that's all for now. Those have been my opinions. Take them for what they're worth.